Hey guys, what's up? So it's been a while since I made the first top 10 hidden gems for the PS1, so about time I made the second part, right? So here I am, once again, to show you 10 great, underrated hidden gems on the JRPG genre for the PlayStation 1. So let's begin. Number 10. Brave Fencer Musashi or Musashi. Alright, so let's start with a bunch of action RPGs, and this guy here is the one that opens the top. I didn't want to include it at first because I've always thought it's quite popular, but the requests were so high that I ended up reconsidering. It was published by Squaresoft in Japan and North America, but not in Europe, even though it did pretty well on sales when it first came out. Turns out it's a really good game with very unique elements for its time. You play as Musashi, obviously, who handles two different swords that do different kinds of things. For example, one of them is used to create combos and also absorb skills from the enemies. The game also has a day and night timer, which can greatly affect the gameplay. So players need to take that into account all the time. Overall, it's quite an original RPG that you might want to play if you haven't, because it's actually a lot of fun.
Been waiting for you.
Number 9. Alundra. Another classic most of us are familiar with. Some people say it's a Zelda clone, and while the gameplay is quite similar to the Zelda games, I think this one truly focuses more on its narrative and characters, making it more of an RPG than Zelda. It's another action game that's actually a little infamous, funnily, for having some really tough puzzles along the way. Other than that, it plays like most of the action RPGs that came out during the SNES era. The plot involves Alundra himself, an elf that has the ability to enter people's dreams, so he goes into a quest entering on these places from the minds of all the villagers, giving the story in depth and somewhat dark situations the more you advance on it. It's truly a cult following classic, and one that I would gladly recommend to almost anybody, since I believe it's a must play. It's really good, and yep, sometimes really tough. Number 9. Alundra 2. The sequel, yes, but completely unrelated. If you play these two games and nobody told you their names, you will never guess they share the same franchise in common, because Alundra 2 is so different from the first one, even though it's still an action RPG filled with tough puzzles, that even relating to its predecessor can be quite bothersome. But in any case, this is yet another good game. Perhaps not as good as the first one, but still very fun to play. It's a 3D action game, as you can see, and it also includes several different features that alienate it from the first Alundra. For example, some boss battles are fought in 2D, and the entire game is in 3D, of course. But the story is nowhere near as dark and profound as the first game. It's instead filled with silly humor and some comedy. But overall, Alundra 2 is an entirely different game, but still a cool experience to appreciate. Number 7. Azure Dreams. This was a huge request as well, but I had never played it before until a couple of weeks ago. I immediately regretted not having done so before, because I found out it was yet another really unique and original game. As you can see, its gameplay resembles that of the old roguelike adventures, moving freely across the maps but engaging enemies in a turn-based battle system that depends on your timing, since every time you move around, they do as well. You can play with a monster by your side, each with their own skills and the like. But the really cool thing about this game is that it just offers a huge variety to the player on how to actually play it, like improving the town and choosing a girl to date as the character grows up. Another important thing to mention is that every time you enter the dungeon, which is a tower, like many other roguelike games, the levels are randomly generated and the main character goes back to level 1. But not the monsters, so venturing deeply into this tower will always require depending on the creature you take with you. So it's a really good game, try it out, it's very interesting. Number 6. Rhapsody, a musical adventure. I've talked about this game several times before in my videos, always popping up when the word easy comes out. Yeah, it turns out that it's by far the easiest RPG I've ever played in my life, or at least one of the easiest. Considering the fact that it's a strategy RPG, it sure surprises people every now and then because of that. But looking at the story, the cute influence and even the music, because Rhapsody is, in part, actually a musical adventure, like its title implies, I can't help but think this game was made for kids, meant to be an easy entry into the genre. And while this RPG is extremely easy with a tremendously silly story, it can be fun for the most part since everything is so generic that you actually feel some kind of charm from it that keeps you playing it at times. So, do I recommend her holy mother of silliness? Yeah, I do. Just don't expect too much from it. Number 5. Eternal Eyes. This is yet another cult classic out there for those nostalgia lovers, but much more of a hidden gem than the first games I talked about in this top. Eternal Eyes is another strategy RPG, very much like Rhapsody and Azure Dreams in terms of the gameplay idea of training and fighting with monsters by your side. The thing about Eternal Eyes, however, is that these monsters evolve after a few levels if you give them a jewel. Depending on the jewel you choose and its element, the evolution will be different. Also, they learn all sorts of magics from these jewels, and it's quite fun to use them during your battles, making the experiences less dull and repetitive. I say these words because the game can become a little redundant at times, considering every time you enter a new dungeon, it's battle after battle and you can't leave without starting again from the beginning when you come back. But even so, this game has also a lot of charm and a pretty okay story that will keep you entertained for the most part. Number 4. Threads of Fate. Sadly, this is another game that was never released in Europe back at the end of the last century. It is an action RPG with platforming elements and also with charm, despite having a somewhat generic story from the two main characters you play as, each of course with their own plot and route. When I first played this game many years ago, I thought it was okay, but it didn't hook me at all. I felt like I needed something more serious, story-wise, with a different challenge. But now that I've recently gone back to it, I'm starting to appreciate the kind of RPG it really is. To my surprise, I've seen a lot of people referring to it as a favorite, meaning this little hidden gem has become the cult following classic we all know. It's a good game, and I do recommend it, but mostly for its gameplay elements. You see, playing as the guy lets you transform into the monsters you have fought, and playing as the girl lets you acquire different kinds of magics to perform various cool spells. So if you're willing to give this game a try, let it be mainly because of that. Number 3. Bandol Hearts 2. Of course I couldn't leave my beloved Bandol Hearts franchise behind, and although this one's not as good as the first one, it's still decent enough for me to consider it a truly hidden gem. Now I know a lot of people have often complained about its battle system, which works similar to a roguelike game where your enemies move at the same time your characters do. But if you can understand these mechanics in a strategy RPG and take advantage, trust me, you'll be fine. I understand that it might lead to unlucky situations at times, but that's actually the gist of it. So even if you didn't love this idea behind the battle system, you're gonna like it either way. However, it only adds up to the challenge, so consider yourself warned. The story is still as violent as the first one, giving room to bloody situations at times, but it's a nice change of pace from all those humorous and silly RPGs I've been talking about this entire video. So if you're looking into strategy RPGs that want to try something unique, you can't ignore the Bandol Hearts series for the PS1, especially if you want a really strange challenge such as this one. Number 2, Ogre Battle. I know I've said I don't like Tactics Ogre before, both for the PS1 and the PSP, but Ogre Battle is an entirely different story. I love this game. It's a port of the Super Nintendo one, a very underrated and also cult following classic that has enthralled many gamers out there for its high strategy values and solid storylines. The game, as you can see, plays like a real-time strategy RPG where you choose what teams will go to which cities to liberate them from the evil empire. You will get tarot cards to aid you in battle, each with their own special skill. Deploying things, however, cost money all the time, which makes the arrangements and micromanagement as very important aspects of the game. Along the way, and in real time of course, enemies will try to take back these territories and also defend their bases. Battles will then take place in a turn-based system that you won't be able to control directly. Your teams will fight on their own, given the kind of strategy you arrange for them when you edited them. These battles will end after 2 turns regardless of the outcome. You know, I could go on and on because there's just so much to talk about, but I'll just end it by saying that it's a really good game and a classic that will be totally worth your time. Number 1, Bangarang Bandits. Yet another strategy RPG takes the throne once again. Bangarang Bandits is a game that I recommended in another video called Top 10 Most Unknown JRPGs for the PS1, and I'm back to praise it even more. I got so into it that I fell in love after the first missions. It's just the kind of game with a solid story, good character development, challenging battles, and different routes that we fans of the genre just adore. I'm not exactly a fan of mechas, and I did mention that in the other video, but I have to say that I really like the idea here, especially because most of the time I felt as if I was actually playing as the characters and not just the robots. This is the kind of RPG in which you move in squares as usual, and every time you encounter an enemy, as you see right now, you get into these animations in 2D as if it was a fighting game. I really like that because it kind of reminded me of the first Fire Emblem games. So although I can't say that this game is very original or unique, I'd still highly recommend it to fans of the genre because it's very good. So that's it, guys. I'm sorry if I included a lot of strategy RPGs, but it turns out that this genre back then was pretty much underrated, underappreciated, which is why for the PlayStation 1, maybe the Super Nintendo 2, strategy RPGs were pretty much unknown. So that's the reason there's so many strategy RPGs in both my Hidden Gems videos for the PlayStation 1. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you next time.